Recent research shows that some lack the confidence to make financial changes to their habits, and it's costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost superannuation opportunities and investment. Well, joining the Informer is UniSuper's Renee Anderson to discuss how women can become more confident with their finances. Welcome, Renee.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Now, research is fascinating. It actually shows that 53% of women say that they worry more about their money on a weekly basis, but only 25% are currently using a financial advisor. Why is the figure so low if they have such concerns?
Well, I think to start with, we worry about our finances because we know that it's important and we know that these decisions that we make do make a difference. So that's the first part. And as far as getting financial advice, well, unfortunately, our industry has a trust issue or a history of a trust issue. So it probably started there. We've come a long way. And so I think generally the public is more open to financial advice now that we've lifted the industry as a profession. But still, women aren't as comfortable getting financial advice. But you know what? I've been in this industry for over 20 years and we're making progress. So we are getting more comfortable, but there is still a bit of a confidence gap there, as you've identified.
Now, according to the ATO, the biggest financial gap between men and women now sits in their super accounts. How is the gap so large? Is it just a matter of men earn more so they contribute more in dollar cents, or what needs to be done to narrow that gap? And should women be held responsible for narrowing it, or is it a systematic approach that needs to happen?
Well, I think you've identified the main issue historically, which is centered around the default way that superannuation was set up. So typically it's a percentage, your contribution to super is a percentage of your salary. So if your salary is low, your contributions are going to be low. That means that how much you have to retire with at retirement is going to be lower. And what's typically contributed to low salary for women is things like taking time out of the workforce. So women take on average 5 years out of the workforce to care for children and family members. So that's going to have an impact. We also might return to work part-time. So that contributes to having a lower salary. We often take the lower paid jobs in the community and do a lot of non-paid work. So all of these contribute to having a lower super balance, which is what we've learned from women who have retired before now. As far as what we can do about it, at a policy level, there are things like, the government paying super on the Commonwealth paid parental leave. I mean, if there's the responsibility to pay super when we take holiday leave, then it makes sense that super should be paid on the leave that we take to have a child. Another opportunity at a policy level is around the low income super tax offset. So this was set up to ensure that for low income earners, the tax paid on compulsory savings isn't higher than the tax that the individual would pay. And so we've seen recently a change to the tax brackets, but this tax concession hasn't moved with it. So it's things like that at a policy level that could certainly help. But what could women do as individuals? There are some things to do or that can be considered. For example, there are different types of contributions that could be of benefit to lower income earners. I'm mindful of the increasing cost of living, and so to say just contribute more is not going to be the answer for many people. But I like to talk about contributions, and particularly these two, because they actually have government incentives that come with them to motivate people to save for their own retirement. So for those that it's appropriate for, they're really, great incentives to consider. So I'll quickly cover off two. The first one is the government co-contribution. So this is for people earning under $57,000. And if you make a contribution after tax, so that's from your bank account to your super account, up to $1,000, the government will pay up to 50 cents for every dollar. So that's a 50% return on your money. So that's worth considering if you meet the eligibility criteria. Another one that, since I've been talking about this one a lot, women have come forward and said, I didn't know about that. That's helpful for me. And that's the catch-up contributions. So if you haven't used all of your contribution cap in the past 5 years, perhaps because you haven't been in the workforce, you've taken some time out, I've had, perhaps because you've had a lower paid job and now you have a higher paid job and so you have a bit more income, then you can actually gather up all of the unused portions of your cap from previous years and make an extra contribution now, effectively catching up.
What you mentioned about super not being paid on parental or maternity leave, it's one of my pet hates. And as you said, we pay it on holiday pay. My goodness, like, why can't we pay it on maternity or parental leave? And the ridiculous thing that we have here where it's projected out, this is a truly gendered problem. We've now seen we're increasing the amount of time. We eventually want it to have up 26 weeks. So they're increasing the amount of time that they're not going to pay super on that time spent. So they're actually exacerbating the problem of super, mainly for women, but also as I'm a sole parent and it would be on me not to get that super. I know Anthony Albanese watches the show often. This is a tick box thing. Just fix this. Now, it's predicted by 2030 that superannuation at retirement for men will be $432,000, where women in the same position will have a balance of just $262,000. Again, we've mentioned the systematic ones. Is this on women, or is this just the barriers that we're facing with the lower pay, the gender pay gap, all adding into this? And should the government be tipping in to bring it up?
Well, like I said, there are government incentives, and sure, there is a lot of conversation at a policy level around other government initiatives that they could take. And there are some, what I would call quick wins, like the Commonwealth paid parental leave. But coming back to, the difference between the balances, I think another important piece to highlight is that the women that we're talking about, that we're learning from, that have retired now, weren't always single. So there are also, I think, opportunities as couples to consider, and again, government incentives, like the spouse contribution, where if one person is earning less than $40,000 and the higher income earner can make a spouse contribution to their super, and claim up to $540 as a tax offset. So that's one thing that couples could consider. Another one is contribution splitting, which, again, I've had feedback that many people haven't even heard of this. And this is where the higher earner, or perhaps the person that is still working, can take their contributions, so this is before tax contributions, and move some of it across to their spouse. So for example, $100 in before tax contribution, $85 of that can be moved to your spouse. So that's another way to have a look at evening out balances. But interestingly, from a couple perspective, we just had our International Women's Day event here at UniSuper, and we had Annabelle Crabb as our amazing guest speaker, and she talked about outsourcing these decisions to her partner to her husband because they play to their strengths, and that's his strength and not hers. It's great that to be open about these conversations. But if it's not your strength, then I would also suggest that, to get some advice, because as a single person or as a couple, there are a whole different range of things that we can consider. And especially as a couple, you have different balances, different incomes, your different ages, you're likely to access your super at different times. Like this just sounds like a whole lot of complexity, but to us, that's actually a great opportunity to really optimize your situation. And the same with the single person. There are opportunities in there, and if you're not confident that you're optimizing them, then it's great to talk to someone.
Yeah, and for those guys sitting there going, it's great, I'm supportive of women having more super, but it doesn't really affect me. If you retire as a couple, you retire with less combined super because of that inequity. If you happen to separate in a rightful attempt to find an equitable solution, they will usually take some of the bigger superannuation and divide it in an equitable and fair reason, because let's face it, mum was out of the workforce looking after your children as well. So it's, this is a universal one. Do not sit back and go, not my problem. It's everyone's problem. Now, as you mentioned, this year's International Women's Day was all about cracking the code. Surely this is one of the biggest codes that women need to be cracked. And how can they do it apart from finding somebody who plays to their strength like Annabelle Crabb and having their husband do it?
Well, first of all, if we do nothing, it's predicted that the situation will improve, but not for another 40 years. So, for example, my daughter will be 53 by then. So that's something that we could do, is just, leave it to the system, or we can actually have a look at the things that we can do now. And I would suggest, why wait? Because there are things that we can do now. So I've mentioned just a couple of the contribution strategies. There are a whole lot of other things that can be considered.
Give us your top tips, Renee, to close up with. Top tips for women to become financially confident.
My top tip would be to talk to your super fund. I mean, we are set up to help people every day build the confidence to make great decisions. As I said, Annabelle outsourced it to her husband. This is our area of specialty, and we're set up to help those who have a simple question that can be answered very quickly, and it's part of your membership, so you should be reaching out to us. We're set up to answer very complex questions at a household level with financial advisors who can, for a fee, answer those questions and help you there. So there's contribution strategies, there's complexity, but there's also people there that can help you. And we're also building over time more content and more specific information just for women. And so you can go to likely any website for a super fund, but our website, for example, has a section for women. We have webcasts designed for women, content, and basically just start to keep working towards closing that confidence gap, not just the super gap.
Great. Next tip, Renee?
Another tip, and this is one that is good to mention coming into up to the end of financial year. This is likely when we might receive a pay rise, and again, mindful of the increasing cost of living, but we're actually used to living without this amount already. So this is an opportunity to say, I'm used to living without this money. I'm getting an increase. What can I do with it, and what's the best option for myself, for my future? And again, if you're not sure, because there are different types of contributions, then reach out to your super fund and ask the question. We even have members, and we encourage this, to ask the question, where should I start? Because sometimes, that's the hardest question of all.
Great. And what about fees, Renee? Is there a big difference in fees? Can we do better on fees with our super? Is it something that we should consider?
There's a difference in fees between funds, yes. And if you don't have more to contribute, then this is potentially a quick win. It's no new money, but there'll be more for you at retirement if you're paying less in fees. You shouldn't pay more than what you need to.
Great. All right, Renee Anderson from Uni Super, thanks so much for your time and insights.
Thanks for having me, Michael.